Face down your enemies and strike them with nothing more than your fists and exceptional accuracy. This is the way of the monk. The monk is a powerful physical attacker with incredible aim that expends their own health to dish out decisive blows, while also being capable of keeping themselves out of any sticky situation. The monk prides itself on an incredible HP and crit rate stat, while also having amazing physical attack and aim stats to boot. The monk's most obvious weapon of choice is actually their fists, as their weapon proficiencies, while not completely awful, are nothing to write home about. This is a double-edged sword, however, since monks won't often need to worry about their damage being halved for having certain weapons equipped, but they also won't be able to easily take advantage of said weapon weaknesses either. But before we get into any of that in further detail, let's dive into their specialties, first up being concentration. When the monk uses either of their Invigorate, Inner Alchemy, or Mindfulness actions, their critical chance will be increased by 1% with each cast. Since this buff is multiplied with your visible critical chance stat shown in your attributes menu, combined with the monk's already high crit chance, this specialty will let the monk land critical hits very frequently with just a few of these buffs applied. We'll go into the actual abilities that activate concentration in a bit more detail soon, but know that this buff will be active very frequently. The second specialty at the monk's disposal is Single-Minded. This specialty has two effects, with the first nullifying the Berserk, Confusion, and Charm ailments. The second effect is that both defaulting and using martial arts will quicken the time it takes for the monk's next turn to come around by just a little bit. Single-Minded is more of a minor quality of life boost for the job, as it doesn't do anything too crazy other than providing a few key ailment immunities and speeding up the job as long as you're using its actions or defaulting. A reliable specialty that, while not very showy, is still quite nice to have. And next, the monk's special move is Eternal Inferno. This is an incredibly strong fire-based physical attack on a single target. The bonus effect of Eternal Inferno is a 15% boost to the party's restorative power and critical chance. With how quick the monk's turns come around with Single-Minded, this special move can be used quite frequently, although at this point that seems to be true with almost every single job in this game. Regardless, the only major thing you need to consider when using this move is to avoid anything that absorbs or nullifies fire. Now, let's jump into the monk's combat abilities, starting with Strong Strike, obtained at job level 1. As the name suggests, this is a strong attack on a single target that costs a pretty decent chunk of HP to cast. The damage of Strong Strike is pretty respectable, holding up well until the later parts of the mid-game when compared to other jobs. But the real elephant in the room is this move's low chance of landing. On top of the standard aim versus evasion calculations that go on to determine whether an attack lands, Strong Strike has a luck check, with roughly a 50 to 60% chance of success. If this luck check fails, then the move doesn't land at all. Because of this, if you want to get mileage out of Strong Strike early on, while minimizing the amount of actions you need to do, consider investing in jobs that can raise luck, or even guarantee it. Second up is Inner Alchemy, Mindfulness, and Invigorate, obtained at job level 2, 6, and 8 respectively. Inner Alchemy will restore 20% of the user's HP, while also removing those pesky Poison, Blindness, and Slow debuffs. Excellent to use after a big damage burst to give the monk a little extra health to take any incoming hits. Mindfulness restores 20% of the user's max MP and will cure Silence, Dread, and Contagion. Again, another useful action that removes some very annoying ailments while letting the monk recover before prepping for another round of damage. Lastly is Invigorate, which will boost the monk's physical attack power by 15% for 3 turns. Casting this just before going on the offense will raise the monk's already high damage potential to even greater ones. Pretty simple and effective buff. Now, the reason I've paired these 3 together is because they all proc concentration, increasing the monk's critical chance with every cast made. Because all 3 of these abilities grant the monk something valuable, whether it be healing, damage buffs, or ailment cleansing, you're going to be using them fairly often, which in turn will boost your crit chance even more. Very strong synergy between actions. Next on the list is Firebird and Flames of War, attained at job level 4 and 10. These actions are very self-explanatory. Both are fire-based physical attacks on a single target, with Flames of War being a stronger, more costly version of Firebird. Exploit the fire weakness or use the Oracle's elemental impairment to get the most out of these attacks, though do keep an eye on the user's health, since especially Flames of War can cost a sizable chunk of HP. Next is Qigong Wave and Pressure Point, obtained at job level 5 and 11. Qigong Wave is a physical attack with the added bonus of piercing through an enemy's default status, letting the full damage go through. This ability has a decent HP cost and can be used to keep pressure on enemies and bosses who tend to stack up 3 BP charges before attacking, since they'll be defaulting more often than not. Pressure Point pierces through default as well, but it also will ignore physical defense, letting nothing get in the way of the full damage of this attack from hitting the enemy outside of some damage debuffs on the user. The cost of Pressure Point is also BP instead of HP, so while you might not be able to spam it as frequently in one turn, the scenarios where Qigong Wave is useful will still apply to Pressure Point. Next is Flying Heel Drop, obtained at job level 7. This attack is plain and simple. Expend 30% of your HP to land a powerful physical attack. This is a wonderful boss killer in the early to mid-game sections due to its high damage multiplier, but it does start to sort of fall off later on. Regardless, it deals some good damage, so take advantage of it while you can. Up next is Tortoise Kick, obtained at job level 9. For 10% of the monk's max HP, they will deal a regular physical attack that has the bonus of delaying the target's next turn by a decent amount. Good for pushing an enemy back if you know they're about to act next, but otherwise not too worth prioritizing over just trying to kill the target. Next is Focal Blast, obtained at job level 12. This is the big one. This is an extremely powerful attack on a single target that has the chance of applying a variety of stat debuffs on them. These debuffs aren't insignificant, by the way, they're 20% cuts. This is the monk's boss shredder, as it allows for them to constantly apply debuffs to the enemy while dishing out powerful damage on the side. Pairing Focal Blast with Across the Board will also let you spread this damage and debuffs to all targets on the field. Finally, for combat abilities is Phoenix Flight, obtained at job level 14. This action will reduce the user's current HP to 1 and use the HP drained as directed damage to a target twice. Thanks to the monk's S-rank affinity with 4 HP, landing 9,999 damage with this ability takes pretty much no effort at all to do. But as always, be mindful of the risks when using skills that drop the user's HP, especially this one as it drops it to 1. Now we move on to the monk's passive abilities, starting with Bare Knuckle Brawler, which is obtained at job level 3. This passive increases the user's physical attack by 80% and aim by 30% when both of their hands are empty of weapons and shields. This passive is what lets the monk's damage work well early on, even with their weak weapon proficiencies, since early game weapons and low weight restrictions keep the other jobs from running circles around the monk in damage. That isn't to say that other jobs can't take advantage of this passive as well, especially if weight becomes a problem at any point. Next is Natural Talent, unlocked at job level 13. This is a more extreme version of Bare Knuckle Brawler, increasing both physical attack and aim by 200%, effectively maxing out both stats at higher levels. The big trade-off, however, is that the user must not be wearing any gear for this passive to activate. This effectively turns the user into a glass cannon, being able to dish out consistent damage while not being able to take it themselves very well. Do note that Bare Knuckle Brawler's bonuses do stack additively with Natural Talent, boosting the effects to a total of a 280% physical attack boost and a 230% aim boost. Last up for passives is Maximize HP, unlocked at job level 15. This will double the user's maximum HP during battle, meaning that the normal cap of 9,999 for HP can be raised to a total of 19,998. Do note that the user's HP will start at their current amount when combat begins, and must be raised to its new maximum through healing. Any HP-based action will be adjusted accordingly, whether its effects are centered around how much health you have, or its cost. This passive sees its use in a few ways. First, it can be used on a Shield Master to bolster their defenses even higher, since they will want to have as much HP as possible to keep their allies from dying. Support jobs might also find some use with this, as it'll keep them from dying too quickly, while jobs like the Monk find use for it with skills like Phoenix Flight, as it will increase the damage that ability does by a considerable amount. I would personally describe the Monk as a calculated attacker, looking for an opportune time to strike rather than going balls to the wall on their opponents like many of the other attack-focused jobs in Bravely Default 2. The Monk thrives through the early to mid-game, as the Monk starts out with some powerful attacks and a passive that makes them incredibly cheap to build. The Monk can keep itself relatively secure with Inner Alchemy and Mindfulness while being able to buff their more powerful moves without the need for a Bard with Invigorate. Now, in the right circumstances, the Monk can actually be extremely aggressive, such as using the Freelancer's Mimic to spam Focal Blasts, applying constant debuffs at a reliable speed. Lucky Charm can raise Strong Strike's chances of landing early on, and Treat can be a decent replacement for Inner Alchemy and Mindfulness if the crit buffs and ailment cleansing isn't needed. And don't even get me started on the boosts they can get from Late Bloomer if you have enough jobs leveled up. Slotting the White Mage as a sub-job isn't a terrible idea either, as it can allow for them to play support for the party if their damage isn't up to snuff, or quickly restore their own HP after dealing some damage. While definitely not the most optimal build, it works better than most would probably think upon first glance. The Phantom is sort of a standard pick for the Monk subjob, since it can grant the Defense Pierce buff to all of the Monk's moves, making Focal Blast and Flying Heal Drop even more powerful than before, and it also adds Dark Elemental coverage, allowing for the Monk to have more options when approaching combat, which is never a bad thing. Then, of course, there is the Hellblade. While its moveset overall might not be the best fit for a subjob, the ever-so-famous Phoenix Flight minus Strike combo can rip and tear through enemies with ease, especially when paired with the Maximize HP passive. Just know that your BP and the healer in your party are going to have to perform overtime to keep your greedy butt from being eviscerated. The Monk is a job that practices moderation, needing to balance out its HP and MP usage and recovery wisely. While this works very well in a bubble, compared to the other options given to you even as early as the Vanguard, the Monk can sometimes feel like it's playing catch-up after the very early stages of the game have concluded. While it can still put out some ungodly damage numbers and has the means to shift its role in the party when needed, it just can't reach the same heights as some of its other physical attacking peers, especially when killing your enemy as fast as possible becomes more important later on. If you enjoy the aesthetic of the job and want to take advantage of its unique gameplay style, then you will need to be prepared to play around its shortcomings more than most other jobs. Now on to the fashion tier list, starting with Seth as always. Now, the Monk is actually quite a fascinating job to talk about aesthetics-wise, as there is actually more to it than meets the eye. But first, let me just go ahead and say that the regal garb with floral patterns adorning the front is just so pretty to look at, and that goes for all the designs. Seth has a darker blue pattern across a white garb, which is very pleasing to the eye in my opinion. But what I really want to talk about are the flowers on his shoulder. That is a hydrangea, which is a very symbolic flower in Japan, heck, even across the whole world. Each color has its own different meaning, and the deep blue that Seth has is commonly associated with patience and sincerity, which fits Seth to a T. This added detail just boosts the overall vibe of the Monk design tenfold for me. Easy A-tier spot. Next is Gloria. Her color scheme is more styled towards green and pink, which I think actually fits her pretty well surprisingly, even if I do prefer to associate her more with the color blue for pretty obvious reasons. The hydrangea flower that covers her shoulder and hair is often tied to the feelings of gratitude and compassion, which again fits her quite well, as she often remarks about how she feels so blessed to have reliable comrades by her on this journey. Pleasing outfit with some nice symbolism, another A tier. Third up is Elvis. Similar to Gloria, Elvis is given a main color that I normally wouldn't tie to him, being purple, but I think he pulls it off fairly well. Now, a purple hydrangea flower is mostly connected to feelings of deeper understanding and royalty. With Elvis's scholarly profession and noble birth, it is clear why he is given a purple color scheme for this job. Another A tier. Now, Adele is my personal favorite design for the Monk, mostly because of the light blue patterns being placed on top of a black garb. It just looks so beautiful. Now, Adele also has a blue hydrangea flower in her design, but if I had to guess what specifically the developers were trying to represent with that light color, it would be remorse and forgiveness. While not immediately clear on why this would be given to Adele, especially in the early portions of the game and her upfront and sassy personality, anyone who has given her the time to open up will understand exactly why this is a perfect fit for her. Amazing design and a very heartfelt meaning behind it. This is an S tier for you, Adele.